In a few weeks' time, Brexit and thus the future prosperity of Britain for decades to come will be in the hands of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. This is because the government has no majority, and certainly not for a Brexit plan, which is barely alive anyway. What will he do? Corbyn is a man of consistency, let's give him that. He has always said that he would respect the will of the British people as expressed in the 2016 EU referendum. He wants Brexit. He's specified 6 tests for an acceptable deal, and his shadow ministers have created some wacky ideas about a customs union and a jobs first Brexit. He seems sincere about it. It's his own version of the Chequers plan. It has even less chance of acceptance by the EU. Everyone knows it, though Labour can't admit it. But the Commons will not be asked to vote on Labour's policy, they'll vote on the government's one. Labour will vote down the Chequers plan or any likely variant of it. Corbyn will demand an election so he can sweep into Downing Street and then Brussels and clear everything up. Won't happen. Then what? He has a democratic dilemma. He can stick with his mandate from the 2016 referendum, which looks increasingly dodgy. Soon though he may face a moral and political obligation to follow the mandate set for him by the Labour Party conference. In Corbyn's vision, the party's members frame policy through conference. It is sovereign. Ignoring it is what Labour leaders and MPs did in the bad old days. That was betrayal. Corbyn will follow the democratic decisions reached by the Labour movement. Again, he has been consistent on that principle. What then, if conference demands a final say referendum? Much depends on the wording, which will be a product of Labour's arcane process of compositing different motions and accepting or referring back amendments. It may be quite fudgy. Yet the democratic will of the party is clear, and one of the few things members, MPs and unions agree on. They think May's Brexit is a disaster and they want a final say on Brexit. Most wish to dump Brexit. I left Labour for the Lib Dems because Corbyn isn't radical enough. So will Corbyn stick to following the 2016 referendum mandate, or the 2018 Labour conference mandate? They are reconcilable, luckily, because a final say puts the terms of Brexit back to the British people, and does not in itself mean staying in. That is up to the voters, who will now be free to vote for no deal, or whatever the government gets back from Brussels. There is some irony that the referendum on Europe as a device to give a sovereign say to the British people was devised by Corbyn's longtime mentor, Tony Benn, who, like Corbyn, was a determined anti-European for much of his life. It also in Benn's day united a badly divided Labour movement. The change of mood from the 1970s to now is that the Labour Party, Trots, Social Democrats, Blairites, Momentum, Ex-Bennites, Chuka, Keir, Diane, Len, virtually everyone, actually want a final say. A young protester shouts as she takes part in the People's Vote demonstration against Brexit. A protesters pro-EU t-shirt. Gina Miller and Caroline Lucas. Tens of thousands of people march through London. Demonstrators at the People's Vote march. 2 months too young to decide on my future. A young girl joins in the march. An EU flag is draped across the statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square. Vince Cable MP, pro-EU campaigner Gina Miller, Tony Robinson and Caroline Lucas MP join with crowds. Crowds gather on Pall Mall. A man resembling Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson joins EU supporters. People gather in Trafalgar Square. Pro-EU campaigner Gina Miller and Tony Robinson. EU supporters, calling on the government to give Britons a vote on the final Brexit deal, participate in the People's Vote march. A young protester shouts as she takes part in the People's Vote demonstration against Brexit. A protesters pro-EU t-shirt. Gina Miller and Caroline Lucas. Tens of thousands of people march through London. Demonstrators at the People's Vote march. 2 months too young to decide on my future. A young girl joins in the march. An EU flag is draped across the statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square. Vince Cable MP, pro-EU campaigner Gina Miller, Tony Robinson and Caroline Lucas MP join with crowds. Crowds gather on Pall Mall. A man resembling Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson joins EU supporters. People gather in Trafalgar Square. Pro-EU campaigner Gina Miller and Tony Robinson. EU supporters, calling on the government to give Britons a vote on the final Brexit deal, participate in the People's Vote march. Labour voters who voted Leave and now worry for their jobs want a final say. If Corbyn backed his own party, he would win new support from surprising quarters. He'd end up with a bigger tent than Tony Blair. A policy on Brexit for the many, not the few. It is not an exaggeration to think that even from opposition he can change the course of history, and for the good of the people Labour seeks to protect. From a referendum triumph much else could follow. Having lost such a referendum, a Tory government might well then fall, and an election and Labour government would follow. What an open goal. The ball is at his feet. It's up to Jeremy now. The Independent has launched its